Here is day 3 of quadratics. And this lesson today is the first lesson in which we see where a quadratic can't be factored. In other words, if I tried to use the x method, it's not going to come out to a nice number that I can use the x method with. Well, thankfully, there's different techniques that we can use, not only x method, to factor out these quadratics. So this is day 1 of one of these first new methods that we're going to learn. It's called completing the square. All right, and we're going to get a lot of work with this. So if this is confusing to you, we're going to do another day on it. We'll practice it in class. It can be kind of hard to get your head around at first, but once you do, it's kind of like clockwork, just like any other of the math that we've done. So let's get started with this. What is a quadratic equation? Well, quadratic equation is an equation with one variable squared. All right, so I have an x squared, and it has to have a squared in it to be a quadratic. What are the zeros, or the roots of a quadratic equation? Right, so this is kind of back to day 1 when we did it in class. You guys were asking if it said to solve for y, or solve for the roots, or solve for the zeros, does that all mean the same thing? It does. It's saying what does x equal, or what x equals. Right? So that's the algebraic version. And then if it's saying what are the zeros graphically, well, it's where the graph crosses the x-axis. All right, so where the graph crosses the x-axis. Part 3, what are some methods you know of how to find the roots of a quadratic equation? We typically factor it, right, with the xbox. Typically factor it with xbox. Or, if we were so inclined, we could graph it as well and see where it crossed the x-axis. We haven't done that, but it's more important to focus on how to do it algebraically, because that's usually how they ask you to do it. Number 4, it says to factor this piece out. All right, so I want you guys to do that. I'm going to put it down real quick. I'm not going to take a lot of time on it, because this should be something you guys can do. All right, I'm not even going to put down the xbox. I just look at this, and I see it's going to be x plus 4 times x plus 4. All right, so it factors out to this, but if you need to show your work, pause the video and do it. And it says x squared plus 8x plus 16 is an example of a perfect square trinomial. Explain why. Okay, well, the key words here are what's italicized. Perfect square trinomial. And what that means is that when we factor it out, we get the same thing twice. Notice how when we factored this out, we got x plus 4 and x plus 4. Right? X plus 4 and x plus 4, which can be written as x plus 4 squared. Right? It can be written as x plus 4 squared. This is why it was super important throughout the entire year when I give you guys these questions and said to expand this out. It's very important that you have to expand it out twice, like this. It's not x squared plus 16. That's incorrect. So this is what's known as a perfect square trinomial, because it comes out to the same thing twice. Notice the key word in perfect square trinomial. The whole point of this lesson is completing the square, right? So instead of explaining why, let's see why. Procedure for completing the square. Step 1, you gotta rearrange the equation. All right. And the way we do that, the way we rearrange the equation, is we want to get the terms with the variables on the left side and then get the c by itself on the right side. All right, so what that's saying, remember how a quadratic looks. This is my a, so a is 2, my b is negative 12, and my c is 14. So the first step is to get variables on the left side and then get c by itself on the right side. All right, so let's do that. 2x squared minus 12x, and then we're going to move c to the other side. Now, when you do this, when you move c to the other side, there's going to be a blank here. I always, and you always will put this blank, plus little underline, because we're going to fill that in. But if we're subtracting 14 from both sides, again, I'm going to have negative 14 on this side. Other really important part, whatever is on this side, we're going to put that same exact blank on the right side as well. Whatever is on this left side, we're going to put that same blank on the right side as well. So you will always have an underline on both sides of your equation. Okay? That was step 1. Step 2, if the number is bigger than 1, then you got to divide through by that number. So in this case, a is bigger than 1. It's 2. We can't complete the square unless a is 1, unless it's just x squared. If it's bigger than that, we have to divide everything out by that number. So I'll divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. All right. And then we will get, when we divide everything out by 2, we'll get x squared minus 6x plus the blank equals negative 7 plus that same blank. All right, so step 1 is good. Step 2 is good. Step 3, identify your b value. What's my b value here? My a is 1. My b is negative 6. So in this case, our b is negative 6. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to use our b value to figure out what is going to go in for this missing piece. All right. What is going to go in, let's use purple, for this missing piece here. Whatever it is, it's going to go in for both underlined, both underlines. And the way we do that is we take the b value, we half it, and then we square it. And it looks something like this. b over 2 squared. b over 2 squared. So, again, my b value is negative 6. So what I'm going to do is negative 6 divided by 2 squared. Order of operations says do parentheses first, right? So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, still squared. Negative 3 squared comes out to positive 9. So this is the value that's going to go in for the underline here and the underline there. Okay. Now, step 4, write the expression as a perfect square trinomial and then simplify the number on the other side. So now what we have, if we do the x box, if we factor out this left side, right? If you factor that out, what adds to negative 6 but multiplies to 9? What is that value? Well, if you think about it, it's negative 3 and negative 3. So the nice thing about completing the square is that you don't have to go through your whole wall. Once you figure out what that number is, in this case, it's -3. Once you figure out that number, that's pretty much going to be your trinomial. So since it's, let's go back to black. Since it's -3, my answer is going to be, on the left side, it's going to factor out to x minus 3 squared, right? Or, if you guys need to see it this way, it would factor out to x minus 3 times x minus 3. But we write it as this perfect square right here, because of the square. So x minus 3 squared equals, what does it simplify to on the right side? It simplifies to 2. Alright, so step 4, write the expression as a perfect square trinomial. That's this part, which we did. And then simplify the number on the other side. Became 2. We did. Now step 5, we want to square root both sides because we're solving for x. And to get x, I'm going to have to get rid of the square root. So I'll square this side. What I do to one side, I got to do to the other. Okay. So on the left side, I'll be left with just x minus 3 equals, pay very close attention to this piece, anytime you put a number, a constant, underneath the square root, you gotta put a plus or minus with it. This little sign right here means plus or minus. And the reason is because remember on day 1 when I said anytime we're working with x squared, we're going to get 2 values for x. Having this plus or minus here will ensure that I will get 2 values for x. Alright, and then I'm just solving for x. Well, how do I get x by itself? Add 3 on both sides. So x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 2. That's my answer. I can't simplify this anymore. That's it. Alright, I know that is a lot to take in. So, pause the video now. Oh, not gonna lie, that scared me. Pause the video now and write down anything you might need to. Alright guys, go on to the next page here. And go through number 1. Try and do number 1 yourself. Alright, just have to close the door. If you tried it, awesome. But if not, let's go through this together. So solve each quadratic equation by completing the square. So we have x squared minus 12x equals 12. I'm sorry, x squared minus 2x equals 12. Well, remember, look back on your front notes. Step 1 should be to rearrange the equation so that you have your x's or your variables on one side and your constant on the other. So this is good. We already have that. And then step 2 should be, if a is greater than 1, you got to get rid of it. Well, step 2 is done. There's no 1, or there's not a number that's greater than 1 in front of x squared. Step 3. This is where we got to put our missing value, right? So I'm really going to have x squared minus 2x plus some blank equals 12 plus that same blank, right? And this is the piece where I need to figure out what's going to go in for this piece and for that piece. And again, it's going to be the same little formula each time to find that missing piece. That formula, per se, is b divided by 2 squared. So in this case, my b value is -2. So I'll have -2 divided by 2 squared. Well, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. And negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So that's what's going to go in for my missing piece on both sides. Right? So step 3 is done. Step 4, write the expression as a perfect square trinomial. So on the left side, you can do your x box now if you need to. And again, the nice thing about this x box is that it's going to be whatever number you get. So what adds to negative 2 but multiplies to 1? Well, it's going to be negative 1. Negative 1 and negative 1. So this whole thing is going to simplify to x minus 1 squared is equal to 12 plus 1, which is 13. Now, I got to solve for x, so you got to take the square root of both sides. Okay. You take the square root of both sides. Be left with x minus 1, because that square is gone now, equals plus or minus, don't forget that, that's going to be something you're going to have to get used to, plus or minus the square root of 13. And now just to get x by itself, we will get 1 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's my answer. Alright. Let's go ahead and do, let's do number 2. Alright, so it's following the same procedure. Rearrange the equation so that we have our variable on one side, the left side, and our numbers on the other. So we're going to have to move this plus 5 to the other side. So we'll have 2y squared plus 3y. Remember, we're going to have the blank here, even though we're moving the plus 5, plus some blank equals, well, 4 plus 5, that's going to be 9, plus that same blank. Okay. Now let's be careful. We can't, oh, you know what, guys? I was wondering why this was looking pretty odd. Let's skip number 2, because the numbers are all off. It's not going to come out very nicely. I meant to skip one of these. So yeah, just skip number 2. Let's go on to number 3 instead. Sorry about that. 1/2 r squared minus 6r equals 2. Well, first thing we're looking for is to move the constant to the other side, which it already is. Right? So we have 1/2 x squared minus 6x plus some blank equals 2 plus that same blank. Alright? But my procedure says I gotta have just 1 x squared. This says I have 1/2. Well, how do I get rid of fractions? I'm going to have to multiply each piece by 2. Right? That way that cancels out. I'm left with x squared minus 12x plus the blank equals 4 plus that blank. Again, remember how to find that blank. It's b over 2 squared. Right? If I want to find what goes here, b over 2 squared. Well, my b is negative 12. Negative 12 over 2 squared. Negative 12 over 2 is negative 6 squared. And negative 6 squared, that's saying negative 6 times negative 6, that's positive 36. So that is what's going here and here. All right. Now, once we have this, once we fill in that blank, we now have a perfect square trinomial that we can solve. Right? What multiplies to 36 but adds to negative 12? Well, that's negative 6 and negative 6. So the left side becomes x minus 6 squared equals 4 plus 36 is 40. Now, solving for x, we got to square root both sides. Square root, square root. Then we'll have x minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 40. Now we got to get x by itself, so add 6 to both sides. X equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 40. Hopefully you guys see this is not fully simplified yet. It's not fully simplified because of this square root of 40. We can definitely break that up a little bit more. Not much, but a little bit more we can break it up. So this is where your VIPS list comes in play, your very important perfect squares. What could I break up the square root of 40 into? Well, if you don't know, it would be 4 and 10. Circle my perfect square of 4, which becomes 2 times radical 10. And don't forget the 6 plus or minus. So x really equals 6 plus or minus 2. 6 plus or minus 2 radical 10. Okay. Just some other stuff from the previous unit coming into play here. Alright guys. So, number, I think I broke this thing. Number 4, you guys can go ahead and try. Make sure that there's no variable out in front. And I might have to end this video a little bit early because I think I might have broke this. I don't really know what I did. So if I can't get this to right, you guys might be off. Oh wait, hold on. Oof, that sucks for you guys. Okay. But I'll skip number 4 because this page is all messed up now. How about that? Let's do number 5. And then we'll skip number 6 as well, just to be nice. So last one, number 5. First thing we should be doing is getting variables on one side and the constant on the other. So if I see negative 4x squared is on this side, the first thing I really want to do is I want to get rid of that negative, right? I hate working with negatives. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to add 4x squared to both sides. All right? The whole reason is I'm going to get a positive 4x squared now. So I'll have 4x squared plus 24x plus 11 equals 0. All right, so I kind of did, I did my own first step because I saw that negative there. So now what I'm going to do is now I'll get my variables on the left side and my constant on the right. So I'll have 4x squared plus 24x. And to move the 11, I'm going to subtract it to both sides, which means I'll be left with some blank here. Don't forget that blank. Equals negative 11 plus that same blank. Okay. Following the procedure on the front page, I can't complete the square yet because there's a 4 out in front. So that means I'm going to have to divide each piece by my value of a, which is 4. So I'll divide this by 4. Almost positive I picked red, but that's okay. Divide this by 4 and divide this by 4. Right? Then I'm left with x squared. 24x divided by 4, that's going to be plus 6x, plus the blank is equal to negative 11 over 4. That's not going to simplify very nicely. Let's leave it as negative 11 over 4, plus that same blank. Now I got to figure out what's going here and what's going here. Again, b over 2 squared. B divided by 2 squared. My value of b is 6, so 6 over 2 squared. 6 over 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So 9 goes here, 9 goes here. Now the left side is a perfect square trinomial. So what multiplies to 9 but adds to 6? It's positive 3 and positive 3. So it becomes x plus 3 squared is equal to, and since you guys probably won't have calculators, it's going to be negative 11 over 4 plus 9 is equal to 25 over 4. Now, I gotta get the x by itself, so I'll have to square root both sides. Alright, I guess we're only working with purple, because the other ones will not work. So square root both sides, then I'm left with x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25 over the square root of 4. Right? This is totally equivalent. It's the same exact thing. Taking the square root of a fraction, I can take the square root of the top individually and the bottom individually. What do we see about these two numbers, though? They're perfect squares. Alright, so I'm going to simplify that before I go on. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5 divided by the square root of 4, which is 2. So my final answer, x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 5 over 2. Alright, that's my final answer. Again, we'll skip 6. Just to make sure that I know you guys did it, I want you to draw a big smiley face. Don't draw it actually on it, because we might do it in class. Draw it right to the side here. This will be my homework check. Nice big smiley face right there. Okay? See that? You guys are good. Did the homework. And we'll talk